Dark Materials, which was the Joseph Rotblat Memorial Lecture. And there was a paragraph in it that completely arrested me, and I'm going to, as they say, share it with you. Most educated people, said Sir Martin, are aware that we are the outcome of nearly 4 billion years of Darwinian selection. But many tend to think that humans are still somehow the culmination of that. Our sun, however, is less than halfway through its lifespan. It will not be humans who watch that sun's demise 6 billion years from now. Any creatures that then do exist will be as different from us as we are from bacteria or amoeba. I find that an arresting thought, in some ways a depressing one, in some ways an inspiring one. It certainly makes me feel that one mustn't consider evolution as producing us as its last word. That would be a sort of insult to any scientific process. We happen to know that even in the measurable distance of the last few thousand years, that progress is going forward in our brain formation. I think our job is to remain, without illusions, integral, intact, keep our planet that way as best we can, and pass it on so that this experiment gets more interesting. And if you'll allow me to say so, what I just quoted to you from Sir Martin, unless I much mistake my audience, is genuinely awe-inspiring. You think of watching... Good. Now, I mean, really awe-inspiring, not like seeing a burning bush would be awe-inspiring, for example. Really awe-inspiring. You think of creatures gradually watching the sun die, and they're not us. And they're as far from us as bacteria, our ancestors, are from us. If that isn't mind-expanding, if that isn't awe-inspiring, then you don't have the capacity for awe, and you won't be able to get it from a holy book either. In other words, it's not a matter of whether you laugh or cry, it's a matter of how you think and what you think. And the realization that comes with it is congruent with many things, I believe, but not with the idea that truth can come from desert revelations made to schizophrenics and epileptics. It's a strange thing, isn't it, when you are on a bus now and someone starts talking about how they've got a message from God. I don't know, maybe I'm different. Do you move nearer them? I thought so. Now, Sir Martin, as it happens, is a mild and skeptical, but church-going member of the Anglican Communion. His family's been going to the same church in Cambridge, I think, for a very long time. It's a practice he makes. It doesn't have anything at all to do with his scientific work or beliefs. And why should it? I'm coming now to the point that I warned Tony I wanted to stress, and we're going to talk about later, of the famous observation made by Stephen Jay Gould, wonderful biologist and paleontologist, that religion and science are non-overlapping magisteria, as he put it. There's no necessary reason why they should be in conflict. The two ideas can coexist in the same mind. I was a great admirer of Gould's, but I think I want to disagree, and here's how. Of course, a great scientist can also be a person of faith. Joseph Priestley, for example, who more or less discovered oxygen as we understand it, and whose laboratory was smashed for profanity by monarchist and loyalist mobs in Birmingham and drove him over to Philadelphia. He was a Unitarian, the great man of science and the Enlightenment, but he believed in the phlogiston theory. Alfred Russel Wallace, who did most of Darwin's early work for him, not just on selection, but on continental drift as well, working to your near north that you used to call the Far East, Indonesia, loved nothing better than spiritualist seances. Really liked a bit of table turning and table rapping and burblings from the beyond to sweeten his day. The greatest scientist Cambridge ever produced, possibly, arguably, Sir Isaac Newton, was an alchemist, kept a furnace permanently going in his rooms, which he several times set fire to, in case the moment would come when he would work out how to turn lead into gold. Believed that the Catholic Church was the Antichrist, may have been onto something. Was obsessed with the measurements of he thought it would be better to know the measurements of the original temple than to find out about gravitational theory. Anyway, but a great scientist. It goes on. And there were many brilliant German physicists, rivals and contemporaries of Einstein, working in the same field, who believed that there was Aryan science and Jewish science, and there were two different types of physics. So, of course, these things can coexist, but it seems to me that it's not a matter of their coexistence or their overlap as to whether or not they are compatible, whether or not they're ultimately reconcilable. For example, I'm talking now not just about what people think, but about how. It was a Catholic, not just a Catholic physicist, but actually a man in holy orders, Georges Lemaitre of the University of Louvain, who in the 20s anticipated the idea of the Big Bang, quarreled with Einstein about it, said that he didn't call it the Big Bang, that comes later, he thought of it as the egg from which the universe suddenly burst. And was right, and Einstein had to admit that he was probably the first to get onto this use of the theory of relativity. He took it to the Pope, Pope Pius XI it was, and the Pope was so impressed, being warned that this theory was likely, that he offered to Father Lemaitre, Professor Lemaitre, he said, if you like, I'll make it dogma. I'll say that people have to believe it. He said, well, actually, very nice of you, Your Holiness, but that would be sort of missing the point of a scientific experiment. That's what I mean by saying this mentality is not congruent, not compatible. It's not really reconcilable. And I think we're going to increasingly have to face this, whether we're driven by evidence or by reasoning. Staying with the macro for a bit, one gets asked, you get asked, if you're me, by believers, well, how come there's something and not nothing? It's a very good question. It's actually a very important question. It's asked from the point of view of something, from the point of view of the only species we know of anywhere that could ask that question. It looks out onto vast expanses of nothingness, where nothing is happening and where there is no life. And so you have to make the assumption that you are there and that so you know how all that goes. It rather alters the question when it's being asked in that way, but still, it's a good question, but it doesn't have any very helpful answers, or not if you consider, for example, Edwin Hubble was the first to notice that Newton was wrong and that the universe is not just expanding away from itself, the so-called red light shift at a terrific speed, but you would expect this speed in Newtonian terms to be the rate of its expansion, I mean to say, velocity, to be declining. To the contrary, Hubble noticed it's speeding up, it's getting faster all the time. All subsequent experiments have shown this. In fact, if we hadn't discovered the Big Bang when we did, and we were trying for it now, examining the red light, some of that evidence would already have blown past us. If you can get your mind around this, as around Sir Martin Rees's imagery of our cosmic future. As Professor Haldane used to say, the universe is not just stranger than we imagine, it's stranger than we can imagine. But we know this much, that it's blasting apart very, very fast. A great deal of nothingness is certainly coming to us. There's an enormous amount of nothingness in our future. And even if we aren't prepared to wait for that, or to wait for species change to overtake us, we can see already in the night sky the Andromeda galaxy on collision course with our own. That's certainly going to happen. Whether we destroy ourselves or the sun blows up or not before that, probably not. Collision course. Now, is this part of a plan? You suddenly have to ask yourself, is that part of a plan? If so, whose plan is it? That so much nothingness is built right in and is headed straight for us. So anyone who wants to ask the first question has to be willing to consider its corollary question. And the certainty in the second case, unlike the first, of an answer. So if you think that all this is going on in these gigantic fields of gravity and light with you in mind, then you really do have a self-centeredness problem. You might put it another way. I have tried to put it another way. I'll try it on you. Our first speaker tonight said that his people have been around for 100,000 years that we know about. That's certainly true. There is a difference of opinion about how long our species in general has been on the planet. It's a flash of a second in evolutionary time. Richard Dawkins thinks it might be as long as 250,000 years. You make it 250,000. Francis Collins, the man who did the DNA decoding, the Human Genome Project, who's, by the way, another Christian scientist, or rather,